Most people don't run out of seed first, they run out of fertility. That's the quiet problem underneath modern gardening and modern farming. We've been trained to think the soil is a container, and feeding means buying something, spreading it, and hoping the plants respond. And for a while, that works, until it doesn't. Because the system is fragile. Fertility today is often imported. Bags, pellets, liquids, complete blends. You don't notice how dependent you are until the price spikes, the shelf is empty, or you realize you're applying more every year just to get the same harvest. Here's what's happening. In plain terms, we keep pulling nutrients out of the ground in the form of food, and we replace them with things that arrive from somewhere else. That somewhere else depends on fuel, shipping factories, and a supply chain that can break for reasons you can't control. And even when you can buy inputs, it tends to create a shallow kind of soil. Quick growth on the surface, but weak structure underneath. Less organic matter, less sponge. Less life doing the real work. It becomes a cycle of needing more to maintain less. This is not a moral argument, it's mechanical. It's about what holds up when conditions get rough. So the question is simple: if you wanted a garden that stays productive, with fewer purchases, what would you plant to build fertility from the ground up, again and again, without rebuying it every season? That's where the one-plant story starts. Here's a point that gets missed early on. Plants don't need fertilizer. Soil does. What we call fertility is mostly about whether nutrients are available in the right place at the right time in a form soil life can use. The minerals themselves are already there. In most landscapes, they're not gone. They're just out of reach. Modern growing treats fertility like something you add from above. You spread it on the surface and hope roots find it. That works for shallow-rooted crops, but it ignores most of the soil profile. Below the top few inches, there are reserves that never get touched. Think of soil in layers. The topsoil is active but easily depleted. Below that is subsoil, denser, less biological, but often rich in minerals locked away. Most garden plants never reach it. They feed where it's easy, then stall. So the real question isn't how do I add nutrients, it's how do I move nutrients. Old systems understood this without fancy terms. They relied on plants that could reach deep, pull material up, and return it to the surface in a usable form. Not once. Repeatedly. This is vertical cycling. Roots go down. Leaves come up. You cut the leaves, and those nutrients re-enter the topsoil where vegetables actually feed. When you do this right, you're not importing fertility. You're relocating it. You're converting depth into productivity. That distinction matters. One approach depends on constant resupply. The other depends on time and biology. And only a few plants are built to do this job efficiently year after year without being replanted. That's where deep-rooted accumulators enter the picture. Dynamic accumulator is a term people throw around loosely. It sounds impressive, but it often creates the wrong picture. These plants don't create nutrients out of thin air. They don't magically improve soil just by existing. What they do when they work is move material from deep layers of soil to the surface where other plants can use it. Depth is the key. Many garden crops never go deeper than a foot. Some barely reach 6 inches. Below that, minerals sit untouched for decades. Calcium, potassium, trace elements present, but unavailable. Deep-rooted plants break that pattern. Their roots push down through compacted layers, old clay, and subsoil most crops never enter. Along the way, they open channels for air and water. More importantly, they access mineral reserves that shallow roots miss. But access alone isn't enough. The plant has to return those nutrients to the surface in a usable form. That only happens if you cut it or if it sheds biomass regularly. This is where many accumulators fall short. Some grow slowly. Some produce tough, woody material that takes months to break down. Others concentrate nutrients, but not in useful volumes. The best accumulator plants do three things. Well, they root deep, grow fast, and decompose quickly. Miss one of those and the system slows down. This is why only a handful of plants keep showing up in serious soil-building gardens. Most don't move enough material to matter. One plant in particular became famous because it checks all three boxes better than almost anything else growers have tested. That plant is Comfrey, not as a miracle, but as a tool built for one job. Comfrey gets talked about like a wonder plant. That's a mistake. It works because of how it behaves, not because it breaks any rules. What sets Comfrey apart is its root system. Once established, the taproot pushes straight down. 6 feet is common. In loose soils, it can go deeper. That depth puts it below the zone where most garden crops compete. It's not stealing nutrients from your vegetables. It's pulling from a layer they never reach. Above ground, Comfrey does something else most plants don't. It converts that deep access into bulk. Big leaves, thick, soft tissue, fast regrowth. You're not waiting all season for a payoff. You cut it and it comes back. This is important. A plant that mines nutrients but only gives you one harvest a year isn't very useful. Comfrey can be cut 4 or 5 times in a growing season once it's mature. Each cut is another transfer of minerals from depth to surface. But here's the part people miss. Comfrey only does this if you manage it. Left alone, it's just a large perennial. Useful but passive. The system only turns on when you cut it and return the leaves to the soil. That's why calling it a miracle plant is misleading. Miracles don't require work. Comfrey does. The work just happens to be simple, predictable, and repeatable. It's not fertilizer in the usual sense. It's a living pump. You plant it once, and then you decide how often to run it. Used correctly, it becomes part of the fertility system. Used poorly, it's just a big plant taking up space. The difference is management, not magic. When it comes to soil fertility, concentration gets too much attention. Volume matters more. A small amount of highly concentrated fertilizer looks sufficient on paper. But soil doesn't work on paper. It works through biology. Microbes, fungi, worms, those systems respond to mass, moisture, and consistency, not just numbers on a label. This is where Comfrey shows its real advantage. It produces a lot of material, not woody stems, not tough fibers. Soft, water-rich leaves that collapse quickly. That matters. You can have a plant with decent nutrient levels, but if it only produces a little biomass, the impact is limited. Comfrey goes the other direction. Each cut gives you armfuls of leaves. Over a season, that adds up to hundreds of pounds from a small patch. And because the leaves are low in fiber soil, organisms can get to work immediately. There's no long wait. No tie-up period where nitrogen is locked away. You put the leaves down and within days, they're gone. This is why Comfrey often outperforms richer materials in practice. Not because it's stronger per ounce, but because you can apply so much of it so often without harming the soil. Biomass is how nutrients move. It's also how carbon enters the soil. Every load of leaves feeds microbes, builds organic matter, and improves structure. Think of Comfrey as a steady paycheck instead of a one-time bonus. You're not chasing spikes, you're building flow. And once you understand that fertility runs on volume, the way you look at plants and soil starts to change. Chop and drop sounds almost too simple. Cut the plant, lay it down, walk away, and in many cases that's exactly what you should do. But it doesn't work everywhere, and it doesn't work the same every time. The timing matters. If you cut comfrey young when the leaves are soft and green, the breakdown is fast. Nutrients release quickly. That's ideal for heavy feeders like tomatoes, squash, and berries during active growth. If you wait too long and the leaves get thick and leathery, decomposition slows. It still feeds the soil, but the benefit shifts toward long-term organic matter instead of quick nutrition. Placement matters just as much. Chop and drop works best when the leaves are in direct contact with soil, piled on bare ground, tucked under plants, or laid along drip lines. If you leave them on dry mulch or hard surfaces, they dry out and stall. Climate plays a role too. In warm, moist conditions, comfrey disappears fast. In dry or cool weather, it takes longer. That's not failure, it just changes the timeline. Where chop and drop fails is when people expect it to replace all fertility instantly. It's a supplement, not a switch. It supports the soil food web, but it won't fix compacted ground or depleted beds overnight. Used correctly, it reduces inputs. Used carelessly, it becomes extra work with little payoff. The method isn't magic, it's situational. When you understand the conditions, chop and drop becomes one of the lowest effort ways to keep nutrients cycling, right where crops need them. Sometimes mulch isn't the right tool. Containers, raised beds, dry climates, or fast-growing crops often need nutrients in a form roots can take up quickly. That's where liquid fertility comes in. Comfrey tea isn't complicated, and it isn't refined. You cut fresh leaves, pack them into a bucket, add water, and wait. Over a week or two, microbes break the plant tissue down into a liquid solution. It smells bad because decomposition is happening. That smell is not a problem. It's a sign the process is working. What you end up with is a nutrient-rich extract, especially high in potassium. That matters for flowering and fruiting crops. Tomatoes, peppers, beans, berries. This is where comfrey tea earns its reputation. The key is dilution. Straight comfrey tea is too strong for most plants. Cut it with water. Think color, not ratios. You want something closer to weak coffee than black sludge. Pour it at the base of plants, not on the leaves. Liquid feeds don't build soil structure. They don't add long-term organic matter. What they do is bridge gaps. They supply nutrients during peak demand without forcing you to buy anything. This is also where comfrey fits well into small spaces. Even a single plant can supply enough leaves for regular liquid feeding in a container garden. Used sparingly, comfrey tea reduces stress on plants during heavy growth. Used constantly, it can replace balance with dependency. Like all inputs, even free ones, it works best as part of a system. The real value isn't the tea itself. It's knowing you can produce effective fertility on demand without relying on a store. Most people judge fertility by plant growth. That's short-term thinking. The real test is what happens to the soil after a few years. Comfrey's biggest payoff isn't the leaves. It's what happens underground. Those deep roots don't just pull nutrients. They push through compacted layers that water and air struggle to cross. When roots die back or shrink during dry periods, they leave channels behind. Those channels become pathways for rain, oxygen, microbes, and earthworms. This matters more than fertilizer numbers. Good structure lets soil hold water without drowning roots. It drains excess moisture without turning to concrete. It gives biology space to work. In heavy clay, comfrey can slowly loosen ground that never responded to tillage. Not in one season, over years. In sandy soil, it helps anchor organic matter deeper, so nutrients don't wash away as fast. This is the part that doesn't show up in a single harvest. You notice it when digging gets easier, when beds stay moist longer between waterings, when earthworms appear where there were none before. Even if you stop cutting comfrey for mulch, the structural work continues. The plant keeps cycling roots, keeps feeding the subsoil, keeps opening space. This is why comfrey fits long-term gardens, orchards, and perennial systems better than annual beds that get disturbed every year. It rewards patience. Fertilizer can push growth fast. Structure determines whether soil stays productive when conditions change. Comfrey quietly improves the part of the system most people ignore. And once structure improves, everything else becomes easier to manage. If comfrey works so well, the obvious question is why it never became a standard farm crop. The answer isn't hidden, it's practical. Large-scale farming runs on speed, uniformity, and predictability. Fields are planted, treated, and harvested with machines. Anything that doesn't fit that rhythm gets pushed aside. Comfrey doesn't fit. It's a perennial. You don't plant it every year, you manage it. That means cutting on a schedule that responds to weather and growth, not a calendar. It means handling bulky material that can't be spread with a fertilizer rig. Labor matters. Cutting and moving fresh biomass takes time. On a garden scale, that's manageable. On hundreds of acres, it's expensive. Even when the input is free, the handling cost isn't. There's also the issue of timing. Fertilizer bags let you apply nutrients exactly when you want. Comfrey grows when conditions are right. Cold spring, slow growth. Drought, slower regrowth. That uncertainty doesn't work well in tight production schedules. This isn't a failure of the plant, it's a mismatch of systems. Small growers, homesteads, orchards, and mixed gardens operate under different rules. Labor is more flexible. Long-term soil health matters more than immediate output. Space can be allocated to support plants that don't directly produce food. Comfrey thrives in those gaps. It's not a crop, it's infrastructure. Expecting it to replace industrial fertilizer misses the point. It replaces something else entirely: dependence. And for growers who value resilience over scale, that trade-off makes sense. Comfrey didn't disappear because it stopped working in the soil. It disappeared because people stopped separating uses. The safety issue around comfrey is real, but it's specific. Certain compounds in the plant pyrrolizidine alkaloids are dangerous when ingested, especially in concentrated forms like capsules, teas meant for drinking, or extracts made from the root. That's what raised red flags. What got lost is context. Those warnings were about human consumption, not soil use. No agency has banned comfrey as a mulch plant compost ingredient or fertilizer source. There's no evidence that using comfrey leaves on soil transfers harmful compounds into vegetables in any meaningful way. In the soil, those compounds don't behave the same way they do in a human liver. Microbes break them down. Dilution happens fast. Time, biology, and exposure change the chemistry completely. Still, nuance doesn't travel well. Once the word toxic sticks, most suppliers don't want the liability of explaining details. Garden centers quietly removed it. Catalogs stopped listing it. The plant didn't become illegal. It became inconvenient. For growers who understand the difference, the risk is easy to manage. Don't consume it. Don't use it as animal feed unless you know what you're doing. Use the leaves externally in soil systems where biology does the processing. This wasn't a ban on a fertilizer plant. It was a misunderstanding that erased a useful tool from mainstream awareness. And when tools vanish quietly, only the people still using them remember why they mattered. Comfrey didn't vanish because it failed. It vanished because it didn't fit the retail model. Nurseries sell plants that are easy to explain, easy to label, and easy to replace. Annuals are perfect for that. You buy them every year. Fertilizers are even better. You run out and come back for more. Comfrey breaks that pattern. You plant it once and it can last decades. It doesn't need much care. It doesn't need replanting. From a business standpoint, that's not attractive. There's also the explanation problem. Comfrey requires a sentence or two of context. You have to explain that it's not for eating, that it's for soil, that it should be planted where you actually want it long term. Most garden centers don't want that conversation. It slows the sale and opens the door to confusion. So when safety warnings about supplements hit the news, Comfrey became an easy plant to drop. No law required it. No announcement was made. It simply stopped showing up on benches and in catalogs. But the plant didn't disappear. It just went underground, passed from gardener to gardener as root cuttings, shared quietly in backyards, orchards, and community plots. No marketing, no packaging, just use. That's often how durable knowledge survives. Not through institutions, but through people who tested something and kept it because it worked. Comfrey didn't lose its value, it lost its shelf space. And for growers who care more about results than availability, that distinction matters very little. Comfrey works best when it's placed with intention. This is not a plant you tuck wherever there's space and hope for the best. It's permanent. You need to think a few years ahead. The safest places are edges and support zones, orchard rows, the downhill side of garden beds, along fences, paths, or compost areas, places where you can reach it easily with a knife and carry leaves a short distance. Spacing matters. Give each plant room. 3 feet is a good minimum. Crowding reduces leaf size and makes harvesting harder. You want clean access, not a tangled patch. In annual beds, Comfrey usually causes regret. Its roots are deep and persistent. Once planted, it's not coming out easily. That's fine where it belongs. It's a problem where you plan to dig every year. Containers change the equation. Comfrey doesn't thrive long-term in pots, but a single plant grown in the ground can supply leaves for many containers. That's often the better setup. Water is another factor. Comfrey tolerates dry periods, but production drops. If you want regular cuts, it needs consistent moisture, not saturated soil, just steady access to water. The goal isn't to surround everything with Comfrey. The goal is to create a few reliable fertility stations, places you return to, cut from, and feed the rest of the system. When integrated well, Comfrey disappears into the background. It's not flashy. It doesn't demand attention. It just keeps producing material you would otherwise have to buy. That's what resilience looks like in practice. Not complexity, not scale. Just placing the right plant in the right place and letting time do the work. Comfrey works best when it isn't working alone. A closed-loop fertility patch is not about one plant doing everything. It's about stacking simple roles so nutrients keep moving without constant inputs. Comfrey handles depth and biomass, but it doesn't fix nitrogen. It doesn't create organic matter by itself. That's where pairing matters. Nitrogen-fixing plants like clover lupine or shrub legumes add another layer. They pull nitrogen from the air and feed soil biology at the surface. Grasses add carbon and root mass. Trees and shrubs provide shade leaf litter and long-term stability. Together, these plants form a small system. Deep roots bring minerals up. Shallow roots cycle nutrients fast. Leaves fall, get cut, or get dropped. Nothing leaves the site unless you harvest food. This doesn't require acreage. A strip along a fence, a corner near compost, a row at the edge of an orchard. The scale is flexible. The key is consistency. You don't strip everything at once. You cut what's ready. You return it to the soil. You let regrowth happen. Over time, the patch becomes self-fueling. What changes first is not yield. It's effort. You stop hauling bags. You stop guessing how much to apply. Fertility becomes something you manage, not something you purchase. Closed loops aren't fast. They're stable. They trade speed for reliability. That trade is uncomfortable for systems built on constant replacement. But for growers focused on resilience, it's the only direction that holds up long term. This is how gardens quietly detach from supply chains. One patch, one cycle, one season at a time. Comfrey isn't important because it's unusual. It's important because it exposes how fragile most growing systems have become. When a garden only works if inputs keep arriving on time and at the right price, it isn't resilient. It's efficient, but efficiency collapses fast when conditions change. One delay, one shortage, one bad season, and the system shows its weakness. Plants like Comfrey point in a different direction. They don't promise speed. They don't optimize for convenience. They trade those things for continuity. You plant once, you wait, you manage instead of replace. That's not exciting. It doesn't scale quickly. It doesn't fit modern marketing language, but it holds up. Year after year, the plant keeps pulling from depth and returning value to the surface. No invoice, no delivery truck, no dependency. This isn't about rejecting tools or inputs entirely. It's about deciding which parts of the system must keep working, even when the rest doesn't. Fertility is one of those parts. Independence in the garden doesn't mean isolation. It means reducing the number of things that can fail at the same time. It means choosing systems that degrade slowly instead of collapsing all at once. Comfrey teaches that lesson quietly, not by dominating the garden, but by doing one job well over a long time without demanding attention. When growers rediscover plants like this, they're not going backward. They're simplifying. They're choosing systems that rely more on biology and less on logistics. That shift doesn't look dramatic, but it changes what you worry about and what you don't. The story of Comfrey is often framed as a mystery. Why did we stop using it? Who pushed it aside? What went wrong? Those questions miss the point. We didn't stop using Comfrey because it failed. We stopped because we chose systems that reward speed simplicity at the register and short-term certainty. Perennial fertility doesn't compete well in that environment. It asks for patience. It asks you to think beyond the current season. The real question is simpler and more uncomfortable. Why do we keep choosing systems that need constant replacement? A plant like Comfrey forces you to commit. You put it in the ground, knowing it will be there for decades. You design around it. You accept that the payoff comes slowly but steadily. That kind of thinking doesn't match a culture built on annual cycles and quick fixes. This isn't about nostalgia. It's about what still works when convenience disappears. Comfrey doesn't offer freedom by itself. It offers leverage. It reduces how often you have to buy, haul, and depend. It turns time into fertility. For some growers, that's not worth the trade. They want speed and control. For others, especially those thinking long-term, it's exactly the point. You don't need Comfrey to grow food, but if you're serious about soil that improves instead of degrades, systems that hold up under pressure, and gardens that get easier with age, the lesson matters. The plant isn't asking to be rediscovered. It's asking whether you're ready to build something that lasts.